WuWa 2.3 is coming with a lot of banner characters, and while I've already talked about the 6 characters returning for the first half, I have not yet talked about the characters returning in the second half. So here I'm going to be reviewing every single character coming out in 2.3's second half and then giving them a rating based on what I believe to be their value in the current metagame. So let's start off with the new character coming in the second half, being the arrow character Ciaccona. Ciaccona falls in the very popular trend of being a sub-DPS or support character for a character that does not yet exist. However, Ciaccona handles this role with an incredible amount of grace that we do not see in a lot of characters. You see, Kuro often tends to go too far or not far enough with these kinds of characters. Either usually the character is just too overtuned and ends up being too strong because they still don't have their best synergy, or they're just lackluster because they don't have any teams in which they are really shining. However, Ciaccona kind of looks at that and laughs, because Ciaccona brings something unique to the table while still having things that are yet to be exploited by the current cast of characters. You see, Ciaccona is a very unique character, because she is our first character that is capable of applying a damage over time effect that is of a different element than the character themselves, which is that Ciaccona, the arrow character, is capable of applying Spectrofrazzle. I'm pretty sure I made fun of this in my speculation video, but hey, here we are. Ciaccona is actually a very valuable character for this, especially because she has one aspect that no other Spectrofrazzle character has, which is her ability to apply the effect in multi-wave. This means that Ciaccona is a must-have for any Phoebe mains who are trying to play Phoebe within Whimpering Wastes, because this is the first character that is able to apply Spectrofrazzle in multi-wave, and that was Phoebe's #1 issue, her inability to deal with multi-wave content because, well, you just couldn't really reapply Frazzle unless you were constantly swapping between her and Rover, and even then you were kind of locked behind cooldowns. Ciaccona solves this issue entirely, while still having a massive buff for any future error erosion teams. This also makes me think that Carlotta is going to be a big teammate for Ciaccona, and because Ciaccona is going to be synergizing with a Sentinel Resonator, I think she's an incredible pickup, as she not only has current value with Phoebe and then potentially Zani as well, she's also going to be buffed in the future by Carlotta and the error erosion team. I'm going to give her an 8.5 out of 10 for this. Next up is Jinhsi. Speaking of Sentinel Resonators, Jinhsi was the crown of the meta back during the 1.x era, not really being challenged by that many characters. And is she still good in 2.x? Absolutely. Jinhsi is to this day still an incredible character. Not much has changed about her since the release of Zhezha, aside from the fact that, well, now there's Empyrean Anthem, I guess, but that's completely fine for Jinhsi, because Jinhsi already had all of the tools required for her to succeed. She has incredible damage output and a lot of teammates. If you don't have Zhezha, you can turn to Yinlin, or Cantarella, or Mortefi, or Yuenwu. And even if you don't want to use any of them, you can run dual DPS with Encore or Changli and use Verena as your healer. Jinhsi has so many team options, and almost all of them are really strong. The one thing that did impact Jinhsi a little bit is the fact that Whimpering Wastes came out, and her nuking-based playstyle is not optimal for that game mode. But even then, if you play her in a dual carry team, Jinhsi's nukes might do less damage, but there'll still be obliterating waves in her path. So I'm gonna be honest with you, even in Whimpering Wastes, Jinhsi is still capable of succeeding. So I think Jinhsi is definitely a very valuable character. However, she does have a lot of competition in the DPS niche nowadays. There's Carlotta, there's Phoebe, Zani's coming soon as well. There's a lot of carries coming for her Thundah, but how many of them are succeeding? Well, in the 2.x era, honestly, it's quite a bit of them. But despite all of that, I still think Jinhsi is an absolute juggernaut. I think she is a definite 8 out of 10 pull. And then going from Jinhsi, we go to her teacher, Changli. Changli is a very unique character, because Changli is incredibly skill dependent. Her value is very much tied to how good you are at the game. But first, let's talk a little bit more in detail about this. Changli is the absolute queen of dual carry teams. If there's a character that you think, I wonder if they could dual carry, try and pair them up with Changli. That's basically the limit test. If they can't dual carry with Changli, chances are they just can't dual carry at all, because this character is an absolute fiend for quick swap. There is no real way for me to sugarcoat it. Almost every single one of her attacks has great swap windows, and you can easily swap into her and just out of her again. Changli is an incredibly non-committal character when playing her in quick swap, and she takes like almost no time on the field if you're playing her properly. This character is honestly just kind of the peak of quick swap, but quick swap is a very skill-dependent playstyle. If you don't have the reaction time or the game knowledge to know what to quick swap, then she's not going to perform that well. She does have a hyper carry team with Brant, however, which is still going to clear tower pretty well, because after all, Brant is a perfect buffer for her, and Changli just kinda has good numbers. So Changli with Brant together is still very good at clearing tower. But where it especially shines is Whimpering Wastes. This is one of the best teams in the entire game mode because you're just constantly pushing out damage and damage and damage, so you're easily dealing with those multi-wave scenarios. Changli has got to be one of the best characters for all of Whimpering Wastes, whether it be in her hyper carry team or her quick swap team. The sheer amount of value that Changli has for Whimpering Wastes makes me say that she's a 7.5 when you're playing at a casual level. However, if you're playing at a high skill level, Changli is definitely a 9 out of 10. Incredible character. The next character to talk about is going to be Carlotta, our favorite Montelli and the only one that's playable, obviously. Carlotta is one of the best DPSs in the entire game. I think everyone is aware of the fact that when it comes to clearing tower, this is your girl. When you need someone to just absolutely curb stomp a boss, you call up Carlotta. She has the highest single target DPS in the entire game, especially when playing her with her signature weapon and with Zhezha. You really cannot stop this woman when in single target. So you'd think that because she has such high single target DPS, she'd completely crumble in Whimpering Wastes, right? Well, that's not even true. You see, Carlotta has a good amount of AoE hits in her kit, primarily her Forte heavy attack and her Liberation's activation. The rest will just fire in a straight line, which means that you still have a pretty good amount of AoE as long as you position yourself correctly. Carlotta really cannot be stopped if you know what you're doing. The only real way to completely disable her is with heavy glacial resistance. But if you're in the Tower of Adversity, I know people who have just completely brute forced it anyway. Carlotta is just a stupid character in terms of DPS. And if you're also struggling with holograms, guess what? Carlotta is the best option. This is definitely a runner for one of the best DPSs in the entire game, maybe even the absolute best. I'm gonna have to give Carlotta a 9 out of 10. Honestly, an incredible character that I really can't say that many bad things about. The next character to talk about is Roccia. Now, Roccia is a character who, since her launch, hasn't exactly had a lot of value. You see, she is the dedicated support for Camellia, her 5-star support. But here's the issue. Camellia already has a 6-star support because Sanhua is just that good. Roccia has the very unfortunate challenge of trying to compete with Sanhua, and while in a Camellia team she does win, are you really planning on using 70 pulls just to get a 5% damage upgrade for your Camellia? And that's assuming that your Roccia is on her signature weapon too. I personally don't think that's worth it at all. So honestly, Roccia becomes an incredibly low value pull. The primary advantage to having Roccia on your account, for sure, is that she makes Whimpering Wastes a complete joke. Whimpering Wastes is a game mode that a lot of people struggle with because they just don't have the AoE, but Roccia has the best grouping in the entire game, which makes Whimpering Wastes her #1 use case. I just think the main issue with this is you could also just pull a Camellia instead of Roccia to completely annihilate AoE content. And if you already have a Camellia, you could just pull a GN who is also going to completely annihilate Whimpering Wastes, or get a Changli Brant combo. There's just so many ways to make Roccia irrelevant, so I really cannot justify giving her much more than a 6 out of 10. And then the final character to talk about is going to be our brother Brant, also known as the by far funniest character in the entire game. If you disagree with me, you are wrong. Now, Brant is an incredibly funny character because a lot of people see value in him because of the sheer amount of things he does, but in practice this isn't true. You see, Brant is capable of being a main DPS, he can be a buffer for fusion or skill-based characters, and he can also heal and shield your party members. However, healing and shielding your party members isn't relevant because the Shorekeeper and Verena in question, and there is better buffers on the market if you're just trying to buff skill damage, and there's only 2 fusion DPSs, one of which prefers to run Sanhua. Don't get me wrong, Brant is for sure an incredible character when you're playing him with Changli, and he can also be a Changli substitute in some teams, although definitely not all, because Changli's just more flexible with her rotation. However, Brant starts to shine when you start looking at his synergy with Changli, because whether you quick swap them or you use your Brant to buff your Changli, you are going to be clearing content very fast, because they are made for each other. Brant and Changli are both good quick swap characters, and Brant has a perfect outro skill when it comes to buffing Changli, so it's honestly just a really good combination of characters. And if you don't have a Changli, well, Brant's main DPS is also pretty good. It's a lot better than most sub-DPS turned main DPS teams, because Brant just has more damage than the other sub-DPS characters, as well as having a perfect buffer in the form of Sanhua. Yep, this character's back again, Sanhua's just that good. So Brant can do a lot, but Brant does have one major downside, which is the fact that his signature weapon is a requirement, basically. Not having it is more than a 20% damage loss, and that is assuming you have the second best in slot. He is by far the most signature-reliant character in the entire game, and I don't think anyone except Yinlin even comes close in this regard. But even despite this, I think Brant is a good 7.5 out of 10 pull. So who are you going to be pulling in the second half of Withering Waves 2.3? I have my eyes on Ciaccona, as I am a Phoebe main. All the other characters I already have, except for Roccia, who doesn't really interest me. But let me know in the comments below, and while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, be sure to join my Discord. I'm pretty active in there, so if you ask your question, there's a pretty good chance I'll respond. However, that'll be it from me. Peace.